I am a Marvel guy, always have been. I don't really have anything against DC, it's just that Marvel comics were what I happened to read first as a kid, and that love has stuck with me ever since. Now, as an adult, I know more about the Marvel Universe than I do about the real one, I think, which has allowed me to develop the very fun but extremely weird career of talking about comic books to people on the internet, much like I'm doing right now. While Marvel is still my main source of reading, when it comes to superhero comics at least, I do know a fair bit more about DC than the average person just by virtue of being a professional in the space, and over the last few years, they've been doing something that has caught my notice. This is the Absolute Universe, a new line of comics promising takes on popular DC heroes that are a lot wilder and often scarier. I love me a good superhero horror story, so I was quite intrigued by this. Evidently intrigued enough to do a big branch out from Marvel for the first time in a while. To that end, I have acquired the entire first wave of Absolute Collected Edition comics, and I'm going to be reviewing each and every one of them. Oh, hang on. If you take a quick look at the day this video was posted, it was April 1st. This is a bit. In a second, I'm gonna say, just kidding, I would never flip companies, not even if I was really intrigued by the— Ha! Double just kidding, I actually did do this! Yep, I am doing my first DC Comics video. If you've been following me for a while, you know how big of a deal this is, and, what's happening? Oh, that's cool. Absolute Universe video, Absolute me. Neat. Anyway, what I said just a minute ago is actually true. I have gotten and read the entire first wave of DC Absolute Universe Collected Editions, and I'm going to be reviewing them all. Now, with this being a review video, and also still technically an April Fool's holiday special, this video is going to be a bit less of a lore deep dive than my usual content is, and more of an opinion-focused thing, but I think that's going to work very well for reasons that I will explain further in just a minute. And I should also mention up front that there will be some spoilers in this video, but only spoilers for the first volumes, not the entire ongoing series, so early spoilers. Now, before I start jumping into the book reviews themselves, let me begin with a little bit of context on what the Absolute Universe is for anyone who doesn't know, and also some information on how this video is going to work. The Absolute Universe is a new reality within DC's multiverse that first began releasing comics in October of 2024. There are a lot of titles under this general banner and more on the way, but for this video we're going to be focusing on the first 6, which are Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, and Martian Manhunter. In publication and marketing terms, these books were sold to readers as a dark mirror of the main DC universe, but not in the typical and kind of played out dark and cynical superheroes bad sense. Absolute was doing something more specific. The promise of the Absolute Universe was taking well-known and established DC characters and telling stories about versions of them that didn't have one or more of their fundamental characteristics. Batman doesn't have his money, Superman was not raised by the Kents, Martian Manhunter— I have no idea what the hell is going on with Martian Manhunter. This does make the Absolute Universe generally more dark, but it's not trying to be overly edgy and depressing, actually kind of the opposite. The Absolute Universe explores the good and the positive within the darkness. Basically, the Absolute Universe is asking whether these characters will still be heroes when the things that led to their heroism have been stripped away, and in a larger scale, whether good can exist in a reality that was not built for it. It's a very intriguing pitch, and I remember being interested even when these books started releasing. The fundamental evil of the Absolute Universe has lore connections too, as, bear with me for a kind of shaky explanation here, this reality was created by Darkseid. To summarize this extremely quickly, one of the main big bad villains of all DC, that being Darkseid, or maybe a fragment or aspect of him, I don't know, Darkseid lore is weird, bailed out of the main DC universe entirely and used his essence to create a new reality built on his evil instead of good. In this reality, the fundamental morality of everything isn't in question. This universe is bad. It was built on the life of a supervillain, and that means the heroes are fighting an uphill battle against literally the setting itself. All this was set up in the aftermath to 2024's Absolute Power crossover event, and really came to a head in a one-shot comic called DC All-In Special, which was like an introduction comic to DC's new era and all the initiatives within, including Absolute. At least, I think that's what happened. I didn't read it, and that was very intentional. Normally, for a video, I would read absolutely everything related to the topic so that I had a full understanding going in, but not this time, because I wanted this to be a different experience, both for me and for you watching. As I said just a minute ago, I don't know a lot about DC, at least not compared to my knowledge of Marvel. When something happens in the Marvel universe, I know all the precedent that led to it. But with DC, that is definitely not the case, and that set me up to do something that I was really excited to try since the opportunity comes around so rarely. With Absolute, I could get as close as possible for me to a new reader experience. So, with that hope in mind, I went into this near totally blind. I have a pretty good understanding of the main versions of these DC characters. I have read some of their comics and I've seen their movies, but in terms of Absolute, all I had going in was casual comments and opinions from my friends, and then some occasional moments and characters when they were popular enough to go viral online. Thus, in service of the true new reader experience, I began this project acting as if I didn't know how big-name superhero comics worked, so I didn't read any of the setup beforehand and did what most people would try as their first dive into this. I picked up all the books that clearly said Volume 1 on them, and I started reading. While the main Absolute characters are appearing in each other's books now, this does not happen for the first arcs of each of them. DC made the call to have the first storylines be about establishing the characters individually, rather than immediately throwing them into crossovers, which was definitely the correct call. This gave me a lot of freedom in choosing what order to read the comics in. I could do them by publication date, but again, new reader experience. So I just read them in the order that interested me personally, and I'll explain why I chose the order that I did as we go forward. With that in mind, the first Absolute series that I read on this journey was Absolute Wonder Woman. Why did I choose this one first? Well, it's because I had like 8 people independently tell me that I specifically would love this comic to death. For those who have watched my channel for a while, you probably know that I love magic and superheroes. The intersection of that Venn diagram is my favorite genre of all time. Wonder Woman normally is a little bit that, she's connected to Greek mythology, but apparently Absolute Wonder Woman was leaning into that vibe way more, and all my friends felt the need to tell me about it. Now I've read the book, and I gotta say, my friends were absolutely right. This book kicks ass. Not only is Absolute Wonder Woman my favorite comic that I read for this video, it is one of my favorite comics in general that I've read within the last year. I actually liked it so much that after finishing, I kinda regret starting with it because then I worried it was just going to be downhill from there. So let's begin with what this comic is about. As will be more or less the case for a lot of these, the fundamentals of Wonder Woman are the same. She is still Diana of Themyscira, and she is an Amazon. However, that's kind of where the story immediately diverges. This version of Diana was taken from the Amazons, stolen from them as a baby as punishment for some crime that the Amazons committed against the gods. Then, the baby was forced to be raised in hell. This raising was done by the mythological Greek witch Circe, who had also been cast into hell for separate crimes and just kind of had this baby unceremoniously dumped on her as a new responsibility. This was intended as essentially a punishment for both of them, so to try and prevent Diana from growing up into a warrior bent on freedom and possibly revenge, the god Apollo magically forbade Circe from ever using the word Amazon, so that hopefully Diana would never figure out her true origin. So then we all know what's going to happen from there. Circe found a loophole, Diana figured out who she was, and grew up into a warrior bent on freedom and possibly revenge. She is still a good person, though. That's going to be the recurring theme of Absolute, good growing in places where it shouldn't. Diana's personality is basically the same as the main one, just maybe even a little bit more battle-hardened. Diana grows up trained in both combat and magic by Circe, the latter one being one of the newer elements. Yes, the original Wonder Woman has magic stuff, but like, absolute Wonder Woman uses it a lot. She doesn't just have magic as a side power, she is fully a fighter wizard multiclass. Though she learns of her real history slowly as she grows up, Diana's first real experience with the mortal world comes through Steve Trevor, an American soldier who dies, gets sent to hell for some reason, and ends up on Diana and Circe's island. This is a surprising sight. Humans don't usually just pop up there, so Diana talks to Steve, saves him from getting mutilated by a couple of monsters, and eventually comes to the determination that he is a good man. This leads to her seeing Steve's arrival as a test of her resolve as an Amazon and a warrior, and she vows to get him back to Earth. This is not an easy task though, as restoring a soul from hell takes very powerful magic, and the magic system within this book is very much the power comes with a price type. Believing this to be part of her purpose as an Amazon and protector of humanity though, Diana powers the spell to return Steve by cutting off and sacrificing her own arm. Yeah, this book is metal as hell, and that's just gonna continue. With Diana's goals and heroism now firmly established, she manages to escape Hell and almost immediately gets involved in super stuff on Earth, saving Gateway City from an approaching army of magical monsters, and then one way bigger monster, which I will be talking about a bit more in a sec. Much of the first arc is cutting between these two events, bouncing back and forth between flashbacks of Diana's upbringing in Hell and then the fight that she is doing in the present. Pretty classic format, and it works very well here. Wonder Woman does break the pattern that the Absolute books have going forward though, because while all the other ones have 6-issue arcs, Absolute Wonder Woman begins with one 5-issue arc and then has a little 2-part mini arc for issues 6 and 7. The mini arc follows directly up on one particular aspect of the first one, that being Diana's escape from Hell. As it was a temporary situation, she wasn't supposed to do that, and then these 2 issues are about her tricking Hades with the help of Persephone into allowing Diana to move a little bit more freely between Hell and the mortal plane, which is apparently the status quo going forward. As for the plot, I think that's a good enough summary. This is more of a review video than a lore breakdown after all, so I want to spend more time talking about the themes, characters, actual construction of the comic, etc. And I have a lot to say about that for Absolute Wonder Woman. The vibes of Absolute Wonder Woman are immaculate, and I particularly love the way that they handle the magic within the setting, because there is very clearly an established magic system here, but they also don't get too bogged down in over-explaining it. They give you just enough to kind of understand the fundamentals, but then they let the stories speak for themselves. This plays very well with the themes of this comic and really the Absolute universe as a whole, because Absolute Wonder Woman is a story about sacrifice. The magic amplifies this through a repeated pattern of loss being used as a weapon. Diana does variations on a trick 3 separate times in this comic, where she purposefully disables her own senses to give herself an advantage in battle. At one point, she fights a basilisk, and if she looks into the basilisk's eyes, it will immediately kill her. So she casts a spell to temporarily make her blind so that she counters the basilisk's curse. Later on in the same fight, she decides to beat the basilisk by overwhelming its powerful sense of smell, so she disables her own sense of smell, which allows her to go more all out with sensory attacks. This isn't limited to Diana herself either. The main monster in this arc has a sort of sonic psychic attack that can hypnotize people at a very large scale. So Diana amps up a spell and temporarily deafens the entire city so that they become immune. Plus, you know, she cuts off her own arm to save Steve, and while that does get magically restored, it is a complicated process to do so. The vibe that I get from this version of Wonder Woman is that she is a warrior who understands that she might have to lose something, though hopefully temporarily, in order to win in the long run. But since she is dedicated to being a protector of humanity, she is willing to take those risks. This is reflected in her personality as well as her magic. She is a kind person, but also an extremely blunt one, and she will not stand for stupid crap getting in her way while she's trying to work, leading to a ton of fun scenes. And oh boy, what scenes this book has overall. I promised it was metal as hell, and it delivers on pretty much every single page. Absolute Wonder Woman had me saying hell yeah out loud in the first scene, and I didn't stop the entire way through. Wonder Woman rides around on the resurrected skeletal remains of Pegasus. The main villain for the series is a giant eldritch death kaiju called the Tetracide. Wonder Woman deals the heaviest blow to the Tetracide with her basically Buster Sword. And if you're thinking, dang, that's a big sword, but it looks a little bit small to kill a kaiju, don't worry. She uses magic to basically make it the size of a building and drops it on the thing. Oh no, but the monster can regenerate, so it's going to heal from even the building attack. Don't worry, Diana turns herself into a Medusa kaiju, and then we get a giant monster fight. This book is a non-stop barrage of the most badass shit you've ever seen. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, it's also funny. Like, there's not so much comedy that it breaks the tone, but this book has genuinely funny moments. Also, I just have to bring up, the writer of this book, Kelly Thompson, also writes a bunch of the Jeff the Landshark comics for Marvel. What a thematic contrast. Anyway, if it's not clear already, I loved Absolute Wonder Woman. It was a fantastic comic, great concept, executed flawlessly. I'm going to go read the rest of it immediately. Also, fortunately for this video, it is the one that I have the most to say about, so hopefully the rest will be a little bit shorter. Unfortunately, from this book, we are going to be falling quite a long ways. As I said, I started with Absolute Wonder Woman because I wanted to jump into Absolute with something I was pretty sure I was going to like. And I figured I could kind of balance that out by doing one of the comics I was less excited for next. This was Absolute Flash, and yeah, I didn't like this one as much. Plot summary first again. The Absolute version of Flash is Wally West, a much younger version of him though. This Wally is 15, and he is a military brat, son of Colonel Rudy West. Classic military kid story at the beginning. He moves around a lot, so he doesn't have a lot of friends, generally feels out of place and very anxious. You kinda know how this goes. But then he meets Barry Allen, who also exists in this universe, but he's not Flash, at least not yet, I guess. Barry is a scientist working on a top-secret experiment in a hidden lab on the military base where Wally lives. Recognizing that the boy kinda needs a friend, Barry sorta takes him under his wing and does something very stupid in showing him the lab and the experiments and how all that stuff works, which he really just shouldn't have done. Nothing goes wrong immediately from this, or nothing supernatural at least. Colonel West does catch the pair and gives both of them quite a chewing out for leaking this classified information to a 15-year-old, and angry about this, Wally later sneaks out of his room, goes to see Barry again, and finds him in the middle of a test, which then goes wrong. Barry is seemingly killed by Wally's interference, and Wally is transformed by something. I don't believe it's ever actually named here, but for simplicity, I'm just gonna call it the Speed Force. It might be something else, but I don't want to have to say the weird nebulous speed time thing every time I need to mention it. Though me just calling it the speed time thing there was very intentional, because Absolute Wally's powers are interesting. This leads into one of the first compliments that I have for the book, which is the visuals, especially in regards to how the Speed Force is depicted. Though the exact function of Wally's powers is never explained, at least not in these first 6 issues, maybe it happens later, I don't know, it seems like his abilities are not traditional speedster powers, and are more connected to him kind of being able to slide along different timelines. The way this weird power is represented on the page itself is very cool. I love the visuals of Wally's powers. They're extremely chaotic, yet also cohesive, and the way that they are drawn and designed does give the vibe of somebody running through time, but incorrectly and in a way they don't fully understand. This works even better as a representation of the book's themes, because Wally is a very anxious kid. He definitely has some sort of mental condition happening, once again not fully explained yet, but possibly anxiety, ADHD, maybe some combination of the two. And that, blended with him literally jumping around time, does give the book a nice vibe at the beginning. It feels weird, but you really feel for the situation that Wally's in. This then just kind of goes nowhere, though, and it's very disappointing. Absolute Flash has a really straightforward plotline. While he gets his powers, he freaks out and runs away from the base, and then the military people, wanting to get an apparently successful experiment back, send a bunch of other empowered experiments after him, these being new Absolute versions of classic Flash villains like Captain Cold. And that's just kind of what the book is. Wally is a teenager with Speed Force powers he doesn't understand, being pursued by paramilitary guys with various other powers. And strangely, the pursuing rogues are weirdly major characters. The book kind of shifts to focus more on them than Wally by the end of the first trade. This is made even worse by the fact that the first 6 issues are not a complete arc in any sense of the term. And yeah, this is part of an ongoing series, and I expect points to be set up and then paid off later in future issues. But like, nothing concludes in the first 6. It's not even a complete character arc for Wally. He starts off as an anxious teen, and he ends as an anxious teen. It's not even horrendous writing, it's just ironically very, very slow. I was talking to some friends about my thoughts on the comics right after I finished reading them, and somebody told me that there's apparently a meme in the DC community calling Absolute Flash fastest man alive, slowest book around. And yeah, I see it. Absolute Flash Volume 1 to me felt like 85% teaser and 15% payoff, which sucks because the beginning was genuinely pretty cool. I like Wally as a character, I'm intrigued by the way that his powers work, and I do want to see where those go. So then when they kind of just abandon that stuff in favor of these far more generic rogue villains, it feels worse. The contrast between the two makes it just, I did not enjoy. Oh, also, Gorilla Grodd is here, though he's just Grodd. This version is not a gorilla. He's a different type of monkey, and he is psychically enhanced and has telepathic abilities. He's fun, but he also doesn't do much. He is Wally's friend, and they're kindred spirits because they both kind of got manipulated by this military organization. But as is sort of the mantra for Volume 1 of this series at least, that's it. I found myself asking that as a question many times on reading. It's just, that's it? That's all that it's going to be? Okay. I know that this is not an uncommon sentiment among readers. I do believe that Absolute Flash is generally the lowest rated of the Absolute titles, but I will compliment Sandwich this and go back to the visuals. I love the Absolute Flash costume. I'm not entirely sure where he gets the Flash suit. I think he pulls it from himself in the future, so it's kind of like a bootstrap paradox thing, but regardless of where it comes from, it does look amazing, so that's another thing that the comic has going for it. Great visuals aside, to wrap it up, I would say that Absolute Flash has a good start, but a pretty awful continuation, which, funny enough, is the exact same problem that I have with the next Absolute title, but in reverse. Absolute Green Lantern. I was also really excited for this one. I don't know too much about Green Lantern in general, but I've always been intrigued by it, and when I inevitably start trying out more mainline DC stuff, Green Lantern will be my entry point. It seems like something I will enjoy. Plus, the Absolute Green Lantern series is written by Al Ewing, a man whose work I love and who is so ingrained to the lore of the Marvel Universe that I mention him in about 90% of my Marvel lore videos. Apparently, I can't escape him even if I jump sides to the other company. And actually, I want to start talking about this book by talking about Ewing's work before I discuss the plot of this. Ewing is a very weird man, and weird in a way that I particularly enjoy. He writes a wide variety of themes and styles, but one of his signature things is weird cosmology, especially weird cosmology in terms of meta-narrative and using the comic book medium as an element of the world building itself. This makes him an obvious choice to write Green Lantern, as emotions are part of Green Lantern's world building, and you can connect that to meta-narrative very well. This is what I was expecting from Absolute Green Lantern, and though I did end up getting it, it wasn't exactly how I expected at first. Absolute Green Lantern throws you right into the action, beginning in the aftermath of a calamity that destroyed the small town of Evergreen, Nevada. That calamity was a giant Green Lantern falling from the sky and crushing the town. Something important to note here that maybe I should have put in the intro about what the Absolute Universe is, but didn't think to at the time. The Absolute Universe comics that we see here are the beginning of superhero stuff in universe as well. There were gods and aliens and unethical government experiments going on before this, but these Absolute titles are chronicling the first major and public superhero events that the world has seen. So nobody knows that this is a Green Lantern yet. It's just a weird green alien shape. The comic follows the pattern that several of the Absolute comics do, which is cutting back and forth between present events and then the origin of those present events. Though unlike Wonder Woman, where it was between her adulthood and childhood, Green Lantern is only cutting back and forth between a few days. In Evergreen, shortly before the Lantern crushed everything, the town was engulfed by this green energy dome, which kept everyone inside from leaving. No one knew where this came from, but shortly after, an alien calling himself Abin Sur, I don't know how it's pronounced, Green Lantern people are gonna yell at me, but whatever. Anyway, he descended from the sky and began judging people. These judgments are very scary to all the bystanders, as this giant alien essentially just tells them to be without fear, and then people start vanishing once he turns his gaze onto them. There's a lot of cosmic and angelic and religious imagery here, which is what I expected from Ewing. I'm gonna kind of speedrun the timeline of events here for reasons that I will make clear shortly, but residents of Evergreen also include several main Green Lantern characters, or their Absolute versions: Hal Jordan, Guy Gardner, John Stewart, and Joe Mullane. As most of these characters try to figure out how to stop Abin Sur from what they think is killing people, they realize that his domes have a weakness to gold. Anything made of gold, or even painted gold, can pass through them with no issues. Eventually, once they realize this, the people confront the alien and realize that he is not actually killing people. What he's doing when he judges them is basically pulling them into a realm of light, and they are still fully alive in there, though now connected to the Absolute Universe's version of the emotional spectrum, which is different and weird. The Absolute Spectrum, at least in this, I believe it gets expanded in future issues, consists of 4 colors, and while they are not tied to emotions technically, they are tied to reactions and attitudes, I guess I would say. Black represents chaotic, unrestrained action, red represents total restraint from any action, green represents correct, or I believe orderly action, and gold represents total understanding and enlightenment. The goal of these aliens is helping people ascend to the gold enlightenment state, and they are being opposed by an opposite faction which believes that the black chaos is the primal form of reality and wants people to move down to that level. This is a simplification. If I explained this all in detail, it would take way longer, especially because this is an ongoing series and all the mysteries have not yet been addressed. I'll use this term though, which is going to mean a lot to some of you and nothing to others. There's a lot of Gnostic influence in this cosmology, which I always do love to see in fiction. As the book continues, Hal Jordan gets empowered with black light, Guy Gardner with red, Joe Mullane with green, making her the Absolute Green Lantern, and John Stewart with gold. And then the book ends, setting up the other wielders of the black light as villains for the future. Here's my issue with it, and the reason that I say this book has the exact opposite problem to Absolute Flash. While Absolute Green Lantern gets to a place that I really like, it starts out painfully slow. The first half of this arc is very dedicated to the eldritch mystery of what's going on, and while I can definitely appreciate that, it leans into the mystery so hard that the plot takes forever to progress. This is the reason that my explanation of the Absolute Green Lantern lore was kind of vague and general and skimmed around a little bit. That lore is only revealed at the end. Much of the comic is dedicated to asking what's going on, and less is dedicated to answering it. While this is a little bit annoying at times, it is ultimately a minor complaint because I would prefer this to what Absolute Flash was doing. I would much rather a book start off slow and then pick up and get better, rather than starting good and interesting and then abandoning that. To Green Lantern's credit, I have also been informed that it continues to get better. I have a lot of friends reading this book, and they've assured me that the tone it keeps for the future issues are more like the end of this first arc and not the beginning of it. I am going to continue it for sure, and I am genuinely excited for that. I like the lore as it's set up at the end of the arc. I like the characters. Joe is good and has interesting dynamics with the rest of them. It is a good book. It just takes a bit too long to become a good book. When I rank my thoughts on all the titles at the end of the video, Absolute Green Lantern is unfortunately going to be low because this is a weak opening. But I can accept a weak opening if it goes somewhere, and especially because of my experience with Ewing, I really do think that this is going to go somewhere. We're halfway through the Absolute titles now, and as we move on to the next book, we have an interesting opposite contrast. The reason I chose Absolute Green Lantern after Absolute Flash was that I was very excited about it. It was one that I thought I was going to enjoy, and after Flash was underwhelming, I wanted something that would meet my expectations. Absolute Green Lantern kinda didn't, as I've addressed, but weirdly, the next one did. Absolute Superman. I was prepared by my friends beforehand for this to be one of the weaker titles, at least in the first arc, though it did pick up later. So imagine my surprise when I read it and really enjoyed the thing. There is a really clear and logical reason for this, I think, but I'll talk about that at the end of the review section. First off, like usual, let's begin with the plot. Absolute Superman is yet another title that cuts between the present and history. In this case, the events being exactly what you'd expect. Some of Kal-El's first adventures on Earth in the present day, and then the death of Krypton. We'll begin with Kal-El's earthly adventures because they are a little bit more straightforward. We are first introduced to Absolute Superman before he really becomes Superman. At this stage, he is wandering around Earth to various third world countries, helping them out against oppressors, but at a small individual scale. His primary enemies are various governments, but more importantly, Lazarus, which is a gigantic megacorporation that employs highly weaponized soldiers named Peacemakers. Once Lazarus notices the pattern of an apparently superhuman guy messing with their operations, they begin investigating him, spearheaded by Agent Lois Lane. Yeah, this is a very different take on Lois, at least from my understanding. Lois tracks down the Superman, interacts with him a couple of times, and slowly realizes that he is a good guy at heart who just wants to help with people. And that means that if Lazarus is going against him, maybe Lois is on the wrong side. Like I said, this part is pretty straightforward. It's the arc that you would expect, but it does work well. What I found to be the more interesting half of this book was the part that was set on Krypton. A lot of this book takes place there, and it uses Krypton as a setting to tell a really interesting political story through this sci-fi lens. Absolute Krypton ran on an extremely rigid class system, so strict that everyone was required to wear their class symbol on their chest at all times. That is what the Superman S is in this reality. It is the symbol of the lowest class. Yes, Absolute Superman is still a farm boy, though in a very different context. This version of Kal-El was older when the planet exploded, so he grew up on a farm. It was just a Kryptonian farm. His father was an engineer, an intelligent but unfairly lower ranked one, and he discovered that because of the way the Kryptonian elite were mining the core of their planet, it was going to lead to Krypton's destruction. When he told them of this, they obviously were not very happy and demoted him, stripping him of all his power. This, of course, did nothing to actually stop the impending disaster, and so Superman's parents began stealing tech from the elite, using it to create an ark that they could take their community to safety with among the stars. Then, in a grand twist, turns out the Kryptonian elite knew what was going on all along and were building their own private arcs to escape Krypton and leave the lower classes to die. Kal-El himself ends up leaking this information to the public, and this causes so much rioting and chaos that all their plans are foiled. The ship with Kal-El and his family is the only one that manages to escape the destruction of Krypton, and the comic does something pretty smart with the existence of other Kryptonians here. The ship does manage to get off the planet, but then it is destroyed in orbit, and essentially all of the community that was aboard gets loaded into these little personal escape pods. Many of those pods are destroyed, but they leave it intentionally open that others could have escaped. So they're doing a maybe there could be other surviving Kryptonians bit, but in a way that actually works within the world building and doesn't feel annoying or forced. Kal-El, again at this stage a kid, not a baby, is then alone in space drifting for like a year and a half as his pod searches for a habitable planet. This drives him a little bit crazy, and then eventually he lands on Earth. Shortly after arriving on Earth, Superman is taken in by the Kents, but doesn't spend too much time with them, as Lazarus and the Peacemakers arrived to mess everything up. Then he goes on the run, there's a time skip, and we get to the present parts of the comic, which I already covered. The plot is not incredibly complex, but Superman as a character isn't incredibly complex, and I don't mean that as a negative. He is the foundational archetype that a lot of the genre was built around. And interestingly, I think that is the reason why I really enjoyed this book, but a lot of other people found it kind of strange and underwhelming. Kal-El in this first volume doesn't really act like Superman. Half the book is his origin story as a child, and the other half is him as a cynical, jaded wanderer, a young man still reeling from massive trauma and figuring out how to deal with that. One of my friends pointed out that this Kal-El seems so out of character for Superman that it turned a lot of people off the book at the beginning, and while he does come a little bit more in line with his main counterpart as the series progressed, it led to it not having the best reception at the start. But I didn't have a lot of pre-established notions about Superman. I mean, I know who Superman is, obviously. I've seen all his movies, I've read some comics, etc. But I have not read hundreds of Superman comics like I have for my favorite Marvel characters. So the tone of this comic didn't seem out of place for me. I didn't have the context to make it seem weird, and I was just able to appreciate it for what it was in a vacuum. I guess the first volume of Absolute Superman just might have that effect. It seems better for new readers than established ones. Granted, I was still able to recognize the bones of Superman as a character in this book. They do a really good job of representing Kal-El as a farm kid. There's a really powerful scene where after leaving the farms of Krypton for the last time, he lands in the American Midwest, looks out on the vast fields, and realizes that even though he's far away from home, there is still something like his home for him to protect. I loved that scene. Another element that might be distancing this version of Superman from the main one is that Absolute Kal-El uses a lot more tech than I believe main Superman does. He has this like nanotech AI space suit, which is how he got to Earth in the first place, and it has like a cape made out of dust that can make shields and constructs. It is very weird and doesn't immediately feel like Superman's power set, but it is cool, and Superman does still have all of his natural powers. It's just this added on to it. Overall, I really enjoyed Absolute Superman. I think it had a clear vision of what story it wanted to tell and was able to communicate it nicely. It's not the most complex, but as I mentioned, Superman shouldn't be the most complex. This book works for what it is, and even though some people apparently thought it was too distanced, I loved it. And now, wow, I really managed to keep up the pattern of getting big contrast between the books completely unintentionally. I promise I read all these comics in the order that I'm presenting them in this video, and I had no idea what to expect going in, and yet we've gotten a big swing from each book to the next. Now we're going from one of the most simple lore-wise to, oh my god, the most complicated by far, Absolute Martian Manhunter. I genuinely don't even know what I'm going to say about this book. It's not that I didn't like it. I liked it a lot. It's just, it's one of the strangest comics I've ever read, and it is damn near impossible to summarize. It is a book that really only works if you're reading it yourself, but I'm going to try my best to convey how I feel about it easily. First thing we need to establish right away. The Martian Manhunter in the Absolute Universe is not from Mars. It's from somewhere. They intentionally leave it kind of vague, but it is from maybe like a mental plane or the mindscape. Regardless of where exactly, it is from somewhere so far away from human space and comprehension that it is difficult to understand. Martian is the term used for it as a parallel to alien, Martian as something weird and different. The book follows human FBI agent John Jones, who is almost killed in a terrorist attack, but survives thanks to the intervention of the Martian Manhunter, or more accurately, as the entity describes itself, the Martian Mindhunter. The Mindhunter is a psychic entity which forms a symbiotic relationship with John, allowing him to see the thoughts, emotions, and memories of others, visualizing them as a kind of multicolored smoke. John uses this power that he doesn't fully comprehend in some normal detective work, and then everything is escalated heavily by the arrival of the White Martian, another psychic entity who's even weirder to describe. The White Martian, for whatever incomprehensible, inhuman reasons, has chosen to inflict tragedy on the people of Earth, and does so through very, very chaotic reality warping means. This thing does not have traditional superpowers. It affects the world kind of in a way similar to the Magnus Archives or even the SCP Foundation. Rather than being a tangible, punchable villain, the White Martian creates phenomena around the town. It causes an eternal night that drives people to madness. It implants compulsions in them to burn people and buildings around them. It messes with the psychology of everybody it affects, and the Martian Mindhunter has the ability to sort of set these manipulations right. That is kind of about all I can tell you as a summary of this book, and if you've read it, you know that even that is only general. This book is weird. It is weird, it is weird, it is weird. However much you think I might be overstating this, I'm actually understating it. Absolute Martian Manhunter is intended to be hard to comprehend. The point of this book is kind of that the reader is in the position of John Jones. You are a human looking on to things that your human mind should not be able to process. And it does do that very effectively, it just makes my job of summarizing it damn near impossible. The best example I can use to prove this is that Martian Manhunter makes use of a visual gimmick I have never seen in a comic before that only works in the form of print media. This is Martian Vision. And I guess I'm just gonna have to describe it and you're gonna have to imagine. Comic book paper is relatively thin, and as most of us are probably aware, if you hold thin paper up to a light source, you can see what's on the other side of the paper. Martian Manhunter actively asks the reader to do that. Hold the comic book page up to a light source, and the art on the other side will bleed through, causing the art on both sides of a single page to merge into a connected artwork. It is an incredibly cool effect. I'm amazed I'd never seen this done before. And the mere presence of an effect like that should really hammer home how weird this book is. The themes of the comic are fantastic. It is all about how psychology and the mind affects the world around you and how you perceive things. There's a mantra that the Martian keeps coming back to, which I really appreciate, that being simply, what happens in your head also happens. It is not for everybody. I have to be very, very upfront about that. If this kind of weird, trippy, artistic take on superhero comics is something that intrigues you, you'll probably love it. But Absolute Martian Manhunter is also going to turn off a bunch of readers in the first couple of pages, because it is just such a specific thing. It's good, it's great even in my opinion, it's just difficult to explain and extremely niche, but there's nothing wrong with that. Not everything is going to be written for everybody, everyone has their own individual preferences in topics and genres, etc. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean that it's automatically bad, which is a lesson that the internet really needs to learn, but that'll probably never happen. Now, as we enter the final Absolute book that I read for this video, we get another contrast, because we go from the artsy, trippy niche one to Batman. And boy, do I have opinions on Batman. This is not as well known on my YouTube channel, this is a bit more from my TikTok days, but I am pretty notoriously not a Batman fan. I don't like him, I gotta be honest. I like a lot of the Bat family and associated characters, but personally, I have never been able to make myself care about Bruce Wayne. I don't find him particularly interesting, and I think he's overused. Do I think he's objectively bad? No, because I understand that not everything's for everyone. There's a great connection to the Martian Manhunter bit from just a second ago. So I saved Absolute Batman for last because it was the main character that I had the strongest opinions on, and I went into the comic, I don't know if apprehensively is the exact right word, but something like that. I was really trying to keep an open mind, and I had genuinely enjoyed most of the other Absolute books up to this point, so I was curious and a little bit nervous as to what I would think of this take on a character that I notoriously am not a fan of. And yeah, I like Absolute Batman more. Most of you watching this video, especially if you've stuck around to this point, probably had a rough idea of what Absolute Batman's deal was. Publication-wise, he's Batman without the money. That was the main pitch. But the thing that people really cared about was that he's Batman, but built like a brick shithouse. And both of those things combined do give you a pretty accurate picture of what this comic is about in the first volume. This is Bruce Wayne, but he doesn't have a fortune to rely on. His dad, though notably not his mom, was still killed when he was a kid. This was a very traumatic event that largely involved bats, and so then, after this, Bruce vowed to protect other people and punish evildoers, becoming the Batman as he saw it as a symbol of fear. That is pretty similar to the main universe. His personality is similar to the main universe as well. This Bruce Wayne is a very blunt, practical man. Though the Absolute version is younger, he is, despite his gigantic frame, 24 years old, and he does feel like a younger one. There's a little bit of immaturity to this Batman, which I think adds a lot to the vibe. Now, the actual plotline of Absolute Batman Volume 1 is, I think, the simplest to explain out of all of them. It takes place in Gotham City. Gotham is being ravaged by a group of criminals called the Party Animals. Batman fights them. That is obviously a simplification, but that really is every major plot point summarized that easily. Despite the simplicity, one thing that this book does a little bit differently than the other Absolute books, which I really appreciated, is that it does give Bruce an opportunity to become more like his main counterpart that he rejects. One of the main conflicts of this book is that the leader of the new criminal gang, Black Mask, offers Batman a ton of money if he leaves his gang specifically alone, with the idea being that Batman can become a wide-scale operation for other criminals if he lets this one go. And Absolute Batman rejects this, obviously, but it does draw more of a comparison to the main universe one than happens in other series. Not that I think main universe Batman would accept an offer of money from a criminal either, but you get what I'm saying, and the contrast between the two in terms of money really is a contributing factor as to why I like this Batman more. Not simply because I think Batman with money is bad, but because it is a new angle for the character's concept that I find more interesting. Absolute Batman is still a strategist and a tactician. Yes, he has muscles the size of other people, but that doesn't mean that he's any less intelligent. However, I think that this intelligence and prep time superhero angle works a lot better coming from the bottom than the top. Normal Batman is a rich guy who has used his money to set up a giant network of complicated plans that he uses to fight evil. Obviously, there are individual arcs that twist that format, but that's the basic formula. Absolute Batman has a network that is of a similar size to the main universe Batman, but he's had to build that up completely himself. And the way that he approaches that, even if it's not often seen in the book, is something that I think is a lot cooler. The idea of a random guy building up to being Batman instead of having the resources to do that from the get-go, yeah, that's pretty neat. There are themes of dedication within the book. Like Absolute in general, there's a lot of themes of doing good in a world that doesn't really support it, interesting narrative beats. But also, let's be real, most people are picking up Absolute Batman because it's just Batman being completely unhinged. This book is violent as hell. Batman still has a no-kill rule, but boy, he's going to get as close to that line as he possibly can, which is not me doing a joke, like that's actively a plot point here. If you want to watch Batman just beating the shit out of people, Absolute Batman is the book for you. This went viral enough when it happened that some of you have probably already seen it, but there is a page where Batman punts a child off a boat. Kid lands in the water, he's fine, but like, look at this page, oh my god! I actually don't even have too much more to say about the book beyond this. It really is probably what you thought it was going in. It is a Batman without money, just kind of being unhinged about his crime fighting. The one other thing that I do want to bring up is I like this book's take on Alfred, and he was a lot more major to the storytelling than I expected him to be. This Alfred is not a butler, very far from it. He's like a mercenary agent guy who runs into Batman when he's also assigned to work on the Party Animals gang case. And he is a very major focus. I would actually call him the main character of a couple of issues over Bruce. He is the only other member of the Bat family that's active in superhero stuff, in this first arc at least. Jim and Barbara Gordon are also present, but they're not really part of the action. I do expect that more Bat family members will probably make their debut in future issues. I know Absolute Catwoman is getting her own whole series at some point soon. But yeah, I don't really have that much more to say on Absolute Batman. It's exactly what you think it is, and it's pretty good. The character is recognizably Batman, yet different enough and different in specific ways that it got around a lot of my overuse criticisms of the character, so I did enjoy it. And with that, that is all 6. So now let me just spend a couple minutes wrapping up this little experiment and what my thoughts are on the Absolute Universe as a whole, which I'll go ahead and say right at the beginning are very positive. Let me begin this section by ranking the Absolute titles that I read for this project. I'm not going to rate them 1 through 10 or anything, I don't really like review systems like that, but I will put them in order from worst to best, based purely on my personal opinions. Both the worst and the best are probably guessable from how I've already talked about them, but yeah, the worst of them, again in my own personal opinion, was Absolute Flash. It just didn't get to a point that I felt really happy with. There's definitely potential there, but it was not realized in this first volume, and from what I've heard, it doesn't really get realized in future ones either. Here's the cool thing though, we're already done with books that I can say I didn't really like. Absolute Flash was the only Absolute title that I came away from not truly enjoying it. All the rest I liked a lot, which kinda surprises me. 5th then is Absolute Green Lantern, and a large part of my review section for that is the reasoning why it's so low. It does get to a good point that I enjoyed a lot, it just takes so long to get there that compared to the other books in this range, it has to get a low ranking. When the series is complete, it will probably be higher than some of the others, but from first volume alone, I can't give it higher than 5. I feel like both of those are pretty uncontroversial takes on the Absolute ranking. This is where we're going to start getting a little bit weirder, because fourth is still Absolute Batman. I liked it more than normal Batman. I cannot put it in the top 3. Absolute Batman was a lot of fun, I liked what it was going for, and as I think I've made clear enough, I did enjoy it. It's just, this is my personal ranking, and I don't really like the very down-to-earth, realistic isn't the word, but you kind of get what I mean. I prefer superhero stories that are a bit more weird and supernatural, so while Absolute Batman was by no means bad, the other 3 in the line are things that I personally like in terms of genre, so I'm going to give Batman a nice 4, but a 4 regardless. Now then, we're getting into the top 3, or top half, there's 6 of them, so whatever, both of those are true. And my 3rd ranked Absolute series, much to my surprise, is Absolute Superman. I don't really know why I enjoyed this one so much, if I'm being entirely honest, I just kinda did. I liked the tone, I liked the themes and storytelling, I liked the world building that they did for the Krypton parts of the storyline. It was just overall a really well-constructed comic. It is not the number 1 ranked, but it is good, and I am having a hard time really nailing down bad things about it. It's just not necessarily the best, but it is incredibly solid in pretty much every area. Then going to number 2, which is Absolute Martian Manhunter. I know that this is going to be kind of hard to understand because huge portions of my Absolute Martian Manhunter review were just me repeatedly saying how weird it was, but I like it when the comics are weird. Absolute Martian Manhunter is a blend of superhero and magic psychological trippy stuff with a little bit of horror thrown in for flavor, and that's the exact kind of thing that I love. This book was strange, experimental, as I've hammered home many times, not for everybody. But it was certainly for me though, and so I'm going to put it at number 2. And then number 1 on the ranking, Absolute Wonder Woman. Obviously, I literally said that at the beginning of the video. This book kicks ass. No notes, that's all I gotta say. With the rankings established, this leads into 2 more questions which are very connected to each other. The first is, which of the Absolute comics do I plan on continuing? And the answer is actually all of them. I had a ton of fun making this video. The new reader angle that I was going for, yeah, I hit that right on the nose. Being able to jump into a new universe like this, that's a very, very rare opportunity, and I'm happy that I was able to make the most of it. And yes, I could start on new comics whenever I want, right? I can pick a DC comic and start reading it and then expand out into the universe from there. But doing that would be a very different experience than jumping into Absolute was, because Absolute was a beginning. DC didn't intend Absolute to be a spin-off, at least not technically. They very intentionally tried to set up these books in a way that didn't need setup. You can jump right into this at the beginning of the universe, and even if you know the bare minimum about DC characters, maybe not even that, you'll be fine and able to understand this. Second connected question then, that was DC's goal, that new reader experience. Do I think they managed to pull that off effectively? And pun intended, yes, they absolutely did. As somebody who's been reading comics for over half his life, I would genuinely recommend the Absolute books as a starting point for people wanting to get into the medium. They're not for everybody. That's a point I've come back to so many times in this video, but I need to say it again here. The Absolute books do typically take a darker tone, so you have to be on board for that kind of thing, but if you are, yeah, this is a great entry. I'm going to continue reading all the Absolute books because I genuinely want to see where this universe is going. I want to see these characters cross over with each other, and I'm very excited by the prospect of having a new universe to learn the lore on as I go, starting from the beginning. So, coming from a Marvel fan, someone who has read almost exclusively Marvel when it comes to the big two for his entire comic experience, DC, good job, and Marvel, you need to learn something from this. Not to make this video about Marvel at the end, but I do want to address this at least briefly. A common criticism of Marvel's recent editorial philosophy from both me and others is that they are very directionless in many areas. They could benefit from something like this, not a full reboot necessarily, but something that is intended as an entry point. Before people commented, the Ultimate Universe wasn't exactly that. It was more of an entry point than a lot of other things, but Marvel's new Ultimates Universe was very fundamentally connected to previous things, and it was a whole weird situation. Absolute, as I've kind of just proven today, is something that you can just jump into and get the full experience. It is connected to previous DC lore with the Darkseid stuff, but you can not know that and be completely fine. Hell, Darkseid is only mentioned in one of these books, that being Absolute Martian Manhunter, and even then only briefly. Marvel, take notes, because the Absolute Universe is the kind of thing that brings people in. And that's not even just my opinions, the sales statistics have been showing it too. Most of the Absolute titles have been wildly successful. DC has found something cool here, and they are going to be getting a lot more of my money in the coming months because of it. I'm not flipping companies entirely. Marvel is still my favorite, and I do on the whole enjoy their universe more. But I'm absolutely willing to branch out, and the Absolute Universe gave me an avenue to do that. Congratulations, DC. This was a fun little journey. Thank you all so much for watching this video. As usual, I hope you enjoyed, especially this one, which was a bit off format for me, holiday special and all, but making a more candid, opinion-based video was fun, so let me know your thoughts on that in general. Before I conclude and do promos and stuff, I do need to address an elephant in the room, because I know the comments are going to be full of it. Does this video mean that I'm going to start covering DC content on the channel more regularly? No, it does not, but for good reason that I should explain. As I literally just said, I enjoyed my journey into Absolute a lot. I am going to continue reading these books, but I'm not an expert by any means. The reason I can do the Marvel videos that I do, especially so quickly, is that I know a lot about the Marvel Universe already, and I don't have that backlog of experience with DC yet. Making a DC video to the depth and quality of my usual content would take me like 3 to 5 times as long. So while I am open to branching out and will for sure be reading more DC things going forward, it's going to take me a bit to build up that knowledge base. So if, and that's a big if, you start seeing DC deep dive content on this channel, it's going to be a while before I'm comfortable doing that. I just need to build up my experience more. This was, of course, a holiday special and therefore a special case. Though, is me saying that going to prevent people from saying, "You've done DC videos before, now do the one I want," in the comments? No, it's not, because people aren't going to pay attention. But, oh well, I said it, so you can ask, but it's going to be in vain. Anyway, if you want to stay more up to date on my content and get early access, if I do start doing DC videos at some point way off in the future, I have a Patreon. If you go subscribe to that, you can get early and ad-free access to all my videos, as well as an exclusive video every month. My username there is the exact same as it is here. There's also a link in the description of this video and on my channel page. It's very easy to find, and special double thank you to everyone who already supports me over there. It really does help me keep making these videos for you guys. Also, shout out to Ruben Perez, one of the artists that I worked with for this video. Ruben is my usual artist. He draws the poses that you see in most of my videos, but for this one, I had extra art. When I told some of my friends who had already been reading Absolute that I was doing this video, my buddy Luna did this quick little sketch of Absolute me, and my response was, "Yo, that's great. If I give you money, can you do more of them?" So I commissioned a whole mini set of new PNGs just for this bit. And who knows, my absolute form might make another appearance in future videos. Lord knows comics do enough weird multiverse nonsense that I will have opportunities to bring it back. But for now, go check out Luna's other artwork as well. They are That Random Robot on Instagram and Blue Sky. And now that this recording is done, I'm gonna go get caught up on the rest of Absolute Wonder Woman. Like, literally now, immediately after clicking the record button to stop this line. So, time for that. Bye, everybody!